We today is a special day. It is one that has been a long time in coming. We started years ago now. It's hard to believe that it has been that long, but we started years ago now, beginning to have conversations about needing to have a capital campaign. Like, I knew when Emily and I came up here, we knew that was going to be a thing we were going to have to look at doing. We started talking about it in 2018, and in 2019 we're getting more serious about it, and things were going good. You remember what those days were like, don't you? Back in those days, long before we knew that when we thought that masks were only for Halloween. Back in those days when gas was under $3 a gallon. We hadn't seen gas over $3 since the early 2010s. I mean, it was good. Back in that time when things were different. Do you remember what that was like kind of towards the end of 2019? We had set out we were going to have a strategic planning retreat. We were going to put some plans together. We were going to do some things. And one of the running jokes at the time was, are we ever actually going to have it? Because it took us 3 times. The first time it got postponed due to a football game because our boys decided that they were going to play really good football that year, and none of us wanted to come to a retreat when there was a football game on. It got postponed a second time due to weather because winter in Missouri. And so we finally had it. The third time it went well. We were starting to put some things together and it was good. And that was in about the last week of February 2020. Just barely a few weeks before everything shut down and we went into crisis mode. And I remember a lot of that is a blur at this point. But I remember some feelings I had though as we were going into those first months of the pandemic. Things that I got to watch as a part of not just this church, but of this community. As folks came together to help one another and to support one another in the face of the unknown. There was still so much back then that we just didn't know. And so we were reacting accordingly, trying to do the best that we could. And at one point we had folks that were coming up here to the church every day just to be there to answer the phone and provide information for folks that needed information, to provide help where we could, to sign up volunteers for things. If they were calling for those things, we had that available. We had folks that went out and they delivered groceries. Some of y'all remember that we had folks that would call into Pringers, folks who couldn't get out or shouldn't get out in the middle of everything. We'd call to Pringers, they would put their order in, and we had folks who were down there ready to go and to deliver groceries so folks could stay fed. We had our food pantry that went from one day having everyone come in, they'd go in, they'd go through and they'd fill up their bags with things that they knew they could use and they needed to. All of a sudden we went to a drive-through almost overnight, which worked incredibly well, except we needed at least about 3 times the number of people there to help us run that, because we also, for so much of it, had about 3 or 4 times the number of people that were coming in and needing help. We had a food drive that we put together very quickly, and we had just set up, and we got an incredible amount of food that came in, but we also got an incredible amount of just donations that folks would send in that kept our shelves stocked, that kept things going, and helped keep folks fed throughout that time. We changed the way that we worshiped. Several times, in fact, throughout the length of the pandemic, we changed how we were doing things. We went all online, and of that, things have changed significantly over the last several years through different forms and iterations of that. And now we've got folks that are with us online every Sunday, and they do a wonderful job. And I know they're there because I get a little dashboard every week that I can go up and I can look at it. I can see, I don't know who in particular, although I know some of y'all. Hi, Zoe. But I can see that, and so it works out really well. We even figured out that we can have worship services outside. We did Easter outside one year, and it worked out really well. I figured out I could preach from the back of my truck. And then I got smart and figured out I should also put sunscreen on. A number of times that my face matched my shirt by the time we got through that service. Do you remember those days? When we were forever changed by what took place. In many ways, what changed and what happened And what came as a result of that was awful. The number of folks that died, that were hurt, are still continuing to deal with the impact of the pandemic, are real. We saw spikes in crime that are just now maybe beginning to ebb a little bit, and we're still kind of watching that. We've seen the rise in hate groups and hateful ideologies that are trying to drive us apart. We've seen a lot of awful things come out of this. We've been challenged in a lot of ways through it. We learned quickly how to do things that we never thought we might need to know how to do. We all know what PPE stands for now. And we know how to use at least some of it in ways that we never thought we did before. Some of y'all learned how to make masks very quickly, and then you got really good at it because you repeated that same process a few hundred times, if not more. We learned how to do things with technology that we didn't know that we could do. We learned how to be a community, not just here inside of the church, but our larger community in a different way. We learned many good things also. We learned how to trust in our faith when it seems so very hard. We learned that things will continue on even when it's hard to see that there is an endpoint in sight to everything. We learned that some things even aren't so bad to do on Zoom. Not that we want to do it all the time, but sometimes it's kind of helpful to not have to go anyplace and just go to a meeting from home or from an office that you're very familiar with. Now, in some ways, though, we saw a lot of this coming. There's a lot of the pandemic we didn't see coming, we didn't know, but some of the things that happened as a result of that were things that some of us knew were coming because we were looking at that, but we were expecting, like maybe 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, some things maybe 15 years down the road that all of a sudden it came up and just hit all at one time. And one of my favorite jokes that kind of got me through some of those times that I would just laugh and not want to bang my head on something else was this one. You may remember this one, the one where God is talking to one of his angel interns, and God says to him, "Did you finish getting everything, arranging all the future events for the 2020s?" The angel said, "Yes." Wait a second. 2020s as in plural? As in the whole decade? God says, "Yes." What do you think I said? Says, 2020? The year? God, did you put 10 years worth of history into 1 year? Maybe. It kind of felt like it at times, didn't it? We smashed a whole lot of stuff into a very short period of time. Now, all of that is, in many ways, build up for where we are today. Because it's all kind of the history that brought us here. That had we been working according to our previous schedule, we would have started this in May of 2020. That was my original time frame for all of this going, and things would have been very different then had we been doing it that way. But here we are today on this World Communion Sunday, able to be here and to worship and to share, not with just us gathered here, but folks gathered from all over the world. And this is when things are beginning in a different way. It's assumed that when you do a capital campaign that it is about a building or it's about a piece of property that you're going to build on. We do those things in capital campaigns because they generally require a lot of stuff to make that happen. A lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of things that we need a big commitment for to make that happen. And generally the building projects, or in our case a renovation project, or buying property, I've seen other places do, those things are big and visible. They're the most visible things that come out of a capital campaign. But capital campaign is not about what we're building or renovating. It's what you're going to do with them that counts. It's what you're going to do, the things that are going to take place inside of whatever you're doing, that is the most important. And what we are doing, what we are about now, is preparing for the generations that are going to come after us. For the generations that are here and a part of the church now, but looking towards the future. A big part of that preparation will be taking the legacy that we have been given from the building that we have received from the generations that have come before us, and how we prepare it to be sent out into the generations that are going to come after. One of the very first things that Emily and I learned about you all when we came, even before we came up here, was that y'all are very much service-minded, service-oriented. I don't remember if it was Richard or if it was Yuzo, who it was that said it to us first, that you can't go anywhere in Marceline without a Methodist being involved in it somewhere, if they aren't in charge of it a lot of times. Now, I've been around the church long enough. I take every statement like that I hear with a grain of salt. The number of times I've heard churches say that we're the friendly church until you walk in the doors and you're like, whew, that's an aspirational goal they've got right there. So I've learned to take that with a grain of salt until we got here, until we had been here and we saw it for ourselves. It's like, no, service is baked into the culture of who we are. And so we're starting this morning with this, with serve. Well, to serve those who are here now and who will be here in the future. This Sunday is serve, and each Sunday after this we're going to take another one of those words, serve, give, invite, and grow. It's kind of the backbone of what we're doing. In fact, you've probably seen them. If you're starting to say, wait, I recognize those, it's because they're a part of the prayer that we start worship off with. Kind of the focus that we're going to have and how we are going towards the future. And every Sunday for the next several weeks, we're going to be taking a new one of those words and how that is going to help us go and reach out to the next generations. How it is going to prepare us for what is coming. But for us, service is the most important. Every church has one that is that they identify with more completely than any others, and there is no doubt about this church that it is to serve. The very first verse of our scripture reading for this morning, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9 says, "We are God's co-workers, and you are God's field, God's building." This fits with us so very, very well, because we get working with others. Working in help of whatever project it is, to work with others and to share in that work and to do the things that need to be done, to do the things that are good to do. We get working alongside. But there are two parts to this verse. The first is to work alongside. And if it were just that, we wouldn't need to be here on Sunday morning. We could already do that. But the second part is that we are God's building, God's field. We are more than just the doing. Go to verse 16. "Don't you know that you are God's temple and God's Spirit lives in you?" God is building us at the same time that we are serving. We are the works of God's hands. The works that he is doing. He is forming us and shaping us just as much as we are out and we are doing and we are serving. That's part of who we are. Do you know what I'm excited about? I'm excited in how our building is going to be transformed. I am really excited that at some point that piece of sheetrock is going to come back down. In a good way, too. Not in the way we feared when it went up there the first time. I am excited, I'm really excited that at some point in time, all of this wood paneling and vinyl paneling we have in the other parts of the church is all going to disappear. That's going to be good to see. But what I am most excited about as we start on this journey is who we are becoming. I am most excited about the work that we're doing and the ways that we are going to serve God now, and we're going to prepare to serve God in the future, where God is calling us to go. I was asked earlier this week at a meeting, why the United Methodist Church? Why be a part of that? And I gave one answer there because we were talking about the church more broadly, but the answer still holds for us here today. Because I see it in us too. Even with all of our flaws and imperfections, and there is no church or organization that is ever perfect, even with all of that, I believe very much so that the United Methodist Church as a denomination and as our church here and now is the best suited for the time that we are living in. From our Wesleyan and Methodist heritage, we receive a spirit that welcomes all people. That's our starting point, that God's grace is already at work. In that spirit, ours is a tradition that says that we are co-workers together in the fields that God has set out, but we are also being transformed and built into something more and something new, that we are the works of his hands. And despite the challenges of what all of this will mean, It means that we have a foundation in faith that says we will go where God calls us to go. We will make the changes that need to be made. That we will look to discover what God has in store for us and reach out to the people around us that all need Jesus. And how we reach out to them will look different for us now going forward than it did in the years and the generations that have passed. We figured out at council meeting on Wednesday that the education wing was built in 1980, and so that means it's 42 years old, if you can believe that. Some of you remember when it was built. And I know it's 42 years old because I was born in 1980, and I'm 42 years old, so I know just how long it has been there. But you got to imagine the folks who first built this church back even farther than that, back in the early 1900s, they were looking at going, I don't know that we'll ever need an education wing. Or they said, what's an education wing? Right? They didn't know what was going to change, what was going to become different. But the folks who did that work 40 years ago, they took and they saw where they were and what was needed at the time, what was going to be needed in the future, and took that legacy that they received and said, we're going to do more to that so that we can prepare for the generations that are coming after. Now, the folks of that time, like I said, some of you all were there, so you know what this is. You probably didn't know what we were going to need now. We don't know too much of what we're going to need now. We've got some ideas. We're going to begin the preparation work. We're going to begin some things to get an understanding of what that's going to be. But we're taking what we have received from those that have gone before us and preparing to hand that off to the next generations. To say this is where we're going. That this is a part of what we can do to prepare for what is still to come. We are united together in Jesus Christ. A part of the family that He has made. We are joined in that working with the Holy Spirit in each and every person that is gathered here, whether we're gathered in person, whether we're gathered online, or whether folks that are listening to the radio. And we have a number of folks that listen to the radio every week. I don't get a dashboard for that one that tells us how many folks were listening on the radio. That one's a little bit harder. Irv's working on it, but he's got a long way to go. But I know because folks say, I listen to you every Sunday. They listen and they hear us on the radio. And 40 years ago, we wouldn't have known that we'd be joining in worship together in all these many different ways. But yet here we are. In a few weeks, we're going to have a special Sunday when we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate the start, where we're going to celebrate our commitments. We're going to celebrate that now we're going to know kind of what our next steps are going to look like. That's going to be the first Sunday of November. That'll be a day of big celebrations. We'll have a meal after church. We'll bring our pledge cards and our commitment cards that say this is what we are going to do. It's going to be a great celebration that day. But as a part of that, we're going to have our altar set up to remember those that have gone before, because it is also All Saints Sunday. The days that we remember those that have passed, where we remember who they were, where we remember the legacy that we received from them as they handed it off to us. And we're going to take that time and we're going to celebrate their gifts to us as we in turn are preparing ourselves to share with the generations that are still to come. In between now and then, we're going to have several times to get together and talk about kind of what this campaign looks like, what our hopes are, what our goals are, some more of the things that we're looking at as a part of it. We're going to have one of those sessions that's going to be the folks that are going to come in and do the work inside of here. They're going to come in and they're going to tell us more about that. What does that actually look like? What will that actually entail? I can tell you that once they get started, there's going to be a period of time we're going to be worshiping down in the fellowship hall because we're going to be able to get in here for a little bit. That'll be a good thing. A good thing to do something different as we're preparing for what is still to come. I am looking forward to where we are going. I'm looking forward to what is coming next. And if at any time anyone wants to sit down with me or with Richard Switzer or with Bill Daniels, we're kind of putting all this together. Richard is heading this up with me to a lot of us to make sure I'm staying on track, but also he's really good at thinking of all the things that I don't think about, which is a lot. And Bill is there to kind of help in another part of that, to be able to talk about things in a different way, give a different perspective to that. But anytime anyone wants to sit down with us, we'll be more than happy to sit down and talk through what this is going to look like. But as we look to that future, today is an invitation to join in serving, to serve God in this way, to serve as we prepare for where we are now and for where we are going in the future, to join us together as we give to who God is calling us to be, to join as we invite others into a life of faith in Jesus Christ, and to join as we grow together to see God's kingdom come. Let us join along in this journey to do as God has called and to be his people in this day and in all days. And let us do this in Christ's name. Amen.